Thanks, everybody. Just looking forward to providing a bit of an overview of what we do with Clevr across North America. So what I've done today is I've prepared a little bit of a deck to sort of set the stage a little bit. And then I've put together a sandbox where we can jump in and bring some of those forms and workflows to life. So we're going to talk about staff growth plans and evaluations. We do a lot of work around teacher growth plans and evaluations, but one of the differentiators that Clevr provides is the ability to do all staff groups in the same platforms. We do a lot of work with non-teaching staff, principals. So we'll highlight a little bit of that today as well. When we talk about Clevr, we really started as a powerful forms engine. And over the years, we've added a variety of efficiency workflow components, such as digital signatures, workflow notifications, so that if a teacher completes a growth plan, they can push a button to notify the principal that the growth plan is ready for review. Principal then goes in and notify the teacher that they've looked at it or that they have some feedback and so on. There is also some reporting that goes along with the Clevr solution and the various forms. We'll show a couple of those today. And then as a team, we're about 30 strong in terms of a Clevr team, and lots of us, like myself, have backgrounds as an educator. I was a former teacher, principal, and an assistant superintendent, leading the technology portfolio. And we have several team members who understand the K-12 business, and this is all we do. When we think about and talk about what Clevr does, we think about these solution areas. I'm not going to talk about all of these today. We have implementations across North America where we have a lot of folks using us for student services, special education. Today, I'm really going to focus in on the staff professional development area. So what's different about the Clevr platform is it is not an out-of-the-box, here is your predetermined framework, and then you use that. What we do is we understand what current state is. So here's a screenshot of a performance appraisal framework that one particular district had. Their different domains, the different rating scale. The shaded area highlights the preferred level of performance that they're hoping that the staff get to. Understanding all of the different domain areas, but also what the reporting requirements are, how they triangulate the evidence that they're collecting, and then what types of outputs or letters and reports need to be produced. So then we build it in the Clevr platform. So all of our Clevr forms are tab-based. So here I'm looking at the performance evaluation with those domains that we just saw in the previous documents. And then the 4-point rating scale set up in radio buttons. Over here is where I'm triangulating my evidence through observations. And it could be a conversation that I'm having with the teacher and recording the date and the time and then some notes related to that. It also could be a formal observation. It could be a quick walkthrough, or it could be a full class observation. Or it could be a product or a piece of evidence. It could be a lesson plan, could be a piece of professional development that the staff member has done some research on. And that's how this particular district was setting up their framework. And then at the end of the day, on that same form, after the triangulation of evidence tab, they move into the different outputs and letters. So depending on whether this teacher is being recommended or does not meet the recommendations, digital signatures are happening. The workflow is happening down below where you can submit it to the next step in the process, notify the office of the superintendent of the current state of this. And then I produce potentially a letter. This one just happens to be one from Murray City in Virginia, but the digital signatures are coming out. The logos of the district come out on the formal polished PDF version of the outputs. This is another example of a 5-point rating scale, what current state was. And this is kind of what we do. We understand what current state is. Here's a more complex one where we did a region-wide implementation with all the districts in this region, understood that they just worked through a 2-year process, coming up with what their evaluation scale should be, what the classroom visit component should look like, what the difference is in a walkthrough versus a classroom observation versus a conference. And then the whole process that they work through including the self-assessment, the growth plan process. And then we take that work that they've done and we work with them to build that out within the Clevr environment. So here is that same process that we just looked at quickly in a couple of screenshots coming to life now in the Clevr environment with tabs. And in this case, the self-evaluation or the self-assessment based on the standards and the different components that they've laid out. Now, we work with lots of districts that don't have a self-assessment component, and that's fine. There just wouldn't be this sub-tab here. Then I work into my growth plan area, enabling the opportunity to have up to 3 goals. I'm choosing the goal type and filling out my growth plan. And then down at the bottom, I'm aligning it to which standards and components this particular goal aligns with. And then moving on in that same framework, this is how they've set up their observations. What's also unique about the Clevr environment is the permissions can be very granular. So the previous screenshot would have the staff member coming in, filling out their own growth plan, filling out their own self-assessment, but they would have read-only access to the same form, but a different section on the phone. So this observations and walkthrough part would be read-only access. And not only that, but it doesn't become read-only access until the principal shares it. Because as a principal, you might be in the middle of making some observations, making some comments. Somebody comes flying through your door, you get interrupted, and you have half of a sentence written, and you don't want to share that to the teacher until it's ready to be shared. So that little trigger on the form enables the read-only access within it. And then here's just a screenshot of the walkthrough, much more abbreviated than the full-blown observation, but the same concept here. I can upload a document, make my comment, and also share this. Here's another example of just understanding what current state was. And this was with the district in Utah, understanding that they had just worked through a process throughout the state of reducing their standards from 10 to 5, and then realigning their performance appraisals and what their observation tool looked like with the 3 levels of performance. And then we built that out within the Clevr environment. Also within Clevr, you can have hyperlinks. So here, those previous documents that I just showed you, these ones can be hyperlinked right within the Clevr platform to give the end users that additional resource guide right there, quick and handy. And then this one looks like that other one we looked at from the region-wide implementation, but this has been updated to be the standards in Utah with the different elements that align and the rating scale aligned to the Utah rating scale. Here's another example based on the Danielson framework. So it's very much aligned to the Danielson framework, except Pittsburgh Public School took the opportunity to utilize the Danielson framework components, but build in their business rules around how the distribution of the components of the appraisal were assessed and measured. So building level scores, 10%, professional practice, 70%, and so on. Throughout the state of Pennsylvania, each of the local education authorities has the ability to have this 10% completely unique to that local education authority. And then here's how they set up their scoring framework for the building level score and also the staff performance based on the 4 different levels calculated by values. And within the Clevr environment, this is what that form looks like. So Danielson framework set up all of the components. As I'm checking off the different levels, I can see the calculations taking place up above. So here is that same percentage allocation based on what we saw earlier in the business rules. And this is the Clevr form bringing it to life. And here is the view of the building level score subtab. The LEA measures would be in this subtab and the teacher specific data in that. Little pop-ups can be available throughout anywhere in the Clevr form to give the end user guidance on where they're at in the process and what they're looking for specifically around these comments. So here is just drilling into that growth plan area so I can see it a little more clearly. And within this framework, their growth plan, their goals, they have the ability to complete them. They have the ability to have they're in progress, or they also have the ability to carry it forward to the next year. And then when this form gets rolled over, if the goal area is complete, it gets cleared out. If the goal area says carry forward, then it's like a copy paste. That entire section comes forward. Integrated growth plans are something that's quite common throughout the different evaluation frameworks in the Clevr platform, but they can look very different. So here's one district and how they laid out their 7 pillars, 7 strategic pillars within the district, and then how they laid out their growth plan areas aligned to each of those. And here's a principal growth plan. As I mentioned earlier, we do performance appraisals and growth plans, all staff groups, not just teachers. We have a lot of principal frameworks within the environment as well. Just another screenshot of an integrated observation within the evaluation framework and the walkthroughs and the conferences and how those look. So this could just be a conference that I'm having with the teacher. It could be in my office, could be in the classroom, could be in the hallway, but it's an opportunity to add that additional data, information to the overall evaluation framework. And then here's that triangulation of evidence screenshot. So in this case, it's a conversation. In this case, it could be a classroom observation, observing students, making some comments about that observation. Or here is a product that I was looking at, incorporating the lesson plans of that staff member. Just a different layout of integrating the observations. This one happens to be a long-term occasional evaluation. So in this district, they had a different framework for LTOs versus the permanent contract teachers. And here's that Danielson framework with the levels of proficiency. The difference in this one, this is a New York implementation where they're aligned to the Danielson framework, but they don't have the calculations taking place in the same way that that Pennsylvania implementation had. Like right here. So you can see the differences in how those are designed. Here's another one just with a contract teacher with the 4 levels and the radio buttons. Lots of flexibility in how the design can look. Here's an educational assistant or social worker. They've got their different levels with the radio buttons. And then in this one, they have the tabs, whether it's related to leadership and teaming, learning environments, classroom practice. Those are the different components that this particular district or local education authority wanted to lay out in their design. Just going to share a few other screenshots, and then I'm going to jump in and bring these to life in a sandbox. This one's interesting. They had about 30 different job titles. So bus driver, custodian, clerical staff. And within that, they had 30 different forms that they were utilizing within the district for their evaluation. When they brought it into the Clevr environment, they consolidated it into one form. And what happens is I change this drop down from bus driver to custodian. The specific skills and abilities dynamically changes. Down below, there are work habits, there are communication skills that are evaluated, but those stay consistent across all of the work groups. So I'll show that live in the sandbox as well. Here we have the summative report. This district had a lot of rookie principals coming in, and they wanted to support those principals with putting together some pre-canned comment banks, depending on the level of performance. So this staff member demonstrates sufficient evidence, and therefore there are comments to choose from. And if I click add, it automatically pops over here. And then I can adjust it over here still. But it was a way for this district to pull a working group together and then put together a group of comments that would help guide the new principal group in best practice comments. Integrated processes can be right embedded within the different forms. And as I mentioned at the earlier part of the deck, there's integrated workflow, digital signatures. Here's a good example of how permissions can be very granular. In the live environment, the superintendent would come in and be able to interact with these boxes, sign off, submit through back to the principal, whereas the principal's coming in on the same form based on rules and access, and they would be signing off here and submitting to their supervisor. So same form, but very granular permissions right down to the data element. In this case, a checkbox or a notification. Drilling into the data, once the data is in a form, it's all in a Microsoft database, and every data element that's captured is a data element you can drill into. So here I have all my staff at different schools, the last modified date of the form, when the form was created. You can see these were all created on this. And I've done a filter here to say, show me all the teachers that have a contract status permanent. And now I'm looking at those staff. Over here, I have a metrics card saying that there are 10 staff. 2 of those staff have completed records and 8 are not yet completed. Like, click on that 8 and show me who those 8 staff are. Because you can have required fields on a form that disable the ability to move forward if that's a requirement that you, so I can't sign off on it until it is a completed form. And this is showing me 9 of them are permanent and 1 is a probationary staff. Same thing, if I click on this one, it would show me who that probationary staff member is. There's also the ability to put together, we call this like a heat map. So this is pulling together all the staff. We have some pretty popular staff here with Jack Nicholson and Keanu Reeves. And the level of performance highlighted as red's not a good thing, blue is a very good thing, and yellow is sort of in the middle. That's how this particular implementation, that's how they wanted their coding. The not applicable is because this is a rookie teacher, and therefore some of the data elements are not applicable for the rookie teachers according to this district's business rules. And just from a functionality perspective, obviously all the Clevr forms are digital, but aligned with every Clevr form is the ability to digitally manage the records retention. So that would be directly aligned to the district's record retention policy. You can keep a performance appraisal for X number of years, call it 7 years, but you could have different records retention for a different form. Maybe it's a leave request form, as an example. All of that is configurable at individual form levels by the district. And speaking of some of those non-performance appraisal forms, just a couple here. We have a number of districts who have very simple forms, one tab, filling it out digitally now within the Clevr platform. And here's another one where it was just verification of previous employment from school district U46 in Illinois. And this is what it looks like in the Clevr environment. But if I click print, this is what the output coming out of Clevr looks like, very similar to the original one. And just a couple of other, just very simple forms. So what usually happens in the district is they start somewhere, and then eventually they evolve into other areas where it's still a paper process. It isn't enterprise. They don't have quick access to it. So here are a couple of other forms that districts have migrated into the Clevr platform. Different landing pages. We're just about ready to jump in, but a principal landing page could look like this. I'm listing the staff that have this form. I have my metrics card, and I have a message card here. So this is just notifying me of some upcoming events, but the messages can be different for the teacher role. So messages can be deployed and differentiated by role throughout the platform. A teacher could have a very simplified, this is a teacher view where I'm logged in, I'm seeing my record. This is my growth plan. And there's my message card, which is slightly different. So let's jump in and we'll take a little tour and bring some of those static screenshots to life. I've set up a couple of sandboxes here today. So I've logged in, and again, different landing pages. I have a message card here. I've logged in as a super user role, so I have access as a principal, more or less. I'm looking at a form here. I've already got a filter set up. These are my staff. I can sort each of these columns to see what their scores are. If I get rid of this filter, a formal process, then I see other elements showing up here as well. Over here, I have a quick profile search, so I can look quickly for a student or a staff if you're using student-related forms in Clevr as well. Here's where I would navigate between my different forms. So I have a professional learning plan form. I've loaded a wide range of evaluation forms here. And if I wanted to click on the teacher training profile form, here and now I'm looking at the teachers, and their teacher training profile form would be behind what I'm looking at here. So loaded a few forms here. I'll take a look at some of them today. Basically, let me just dive in and take a look at this form. So this is the way this one's designed with the tabs. Obviously, school year would be a drop down. Some of this information around school would auto-populate from your live environment when it's live. Type of tenure that the teacher is on. I can upload different artifacts. So here I've uploaded a lesson plan. I just click on the upload. It takes me to my local device, and this is where I can upload any document that's there. Here's the self-evaluation part. Now, I can't interact with the self-evaluation because I'm not a teacher. I'm logged in on Anna's record here, but I'm logged in as a principal. So therefore, I can't interact with the data elements in the self-evaluation. But when I go into the observation section, as you can see here, I can check these checkboxes. I'm currently on classroom environment domains. And as I check these off, you can see the scores are changing. If I go to domain 3 and we look at the domain 3 here, as I check and uncheck data elements, the scores are changing associated with how this particular district wanted those to unfold. And then below we have conferences. So I'd like to request a conference with the teacher. There we have the building score component of it. And here's where I would add different elements, make some comments. So just a quick tour of some of the components here. I'm going to go back to the dashboard for a minute. Just take a look at some of these cards that I have. So I can change my dashboard view. Like if I switch this over to this dashboard, then I have some different elements that are appearing here. Here's that metrics card. Here I have a QP performance appraisal, so non-teaching staff. Here we have 14 records, 8 are completed, 6 are incompleted. I want to know who those 6 are. There are those 6 staff that don't have that record completed, or which 4 have unsatisfactory attendance patterns. And there they are. And if I drill into this particular staff member, it's going to show me the evaluation ratings here. And if I go over to attendance, this demonstrates positive attendance patterns. Unsatisfactory is what's driving that data element on the dashboard. So if I go back to the dashboard now, that will say 3 instead of 4. So that any data element on the Clevr form could jump in and provide that quick view into any of the data elements on any of the Clevr forms. I'm just going to show maybe another very simple form, just an applicant reference form. I click on a staff member here, one tab, filling it out. Who is the applicant? How long have you known the applicant? And this was a fillable PDF document that the district was doing. And now I have it all digital. When I get to the bottom, it's a recommendation. And I can sign off on it. So it knows who I'm logged in as and when. It's just a very simple form. So what I've done in this sandbox is I've set up a notification board here. So if I look at my notification board, I can see that there are a couple notifications that have come in here. Notification board in Clevr looks a lot like an email inbox. And when notifications are sent, they go both to the end user's email, but they also come into the Clevr platform. So if you get 10 emails saying that 10 of your staff have updated their growth plans, you don't have to go back to your email to have quick access. They'll be right here. I click on Ryan's and I can open it. I can archive it or I can close it. If I open it, take me right into Ryan Reynolds' growth plan, and I can take a look at what Ryan did on the self-evaluation. I can go through and complete my evaluation. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to uncheck this notification, and then I'm going to send it through again. So it's updated the date. Notification went through to Ryan saying that this area classroom environment, domain 2A and B, have been completed. So what I've set up in the sandbox, I can log out and I can log back in as Ryan Reynolds, the teacher, just to show you what that looks like. What I've done for purpose of efficiency today is I've set up this linked account. So in my linked accounts, there's Ryan as a teacher. So when I do this, just picture me logging in as a principal and logging back in as the teacher. And then here is my simplified teacher view. There's my form. I have one card. This is my growth plan. And I can see I have a notification here. I click on that notification. Here's that domain 2 that was sent just now. And I can click on that, open the record, and it takes me into, now I'm in as a teacher. I can see what the evaluator, the principal did, but I can't interact here. That said, if I go back to my self-evaluation as a teacher, I can interact. Whereas we saw earlier that the principal couldn't interact with the self-evaluation. So very detailed, granular permissions are allowed to be set up there. And I'm going to log back over to the admin role just for a moment. And take a look at some of the data elements here. So I'm looking at this applicant reference. I can choose what I want to see here. So if I want to configure my layout, maybe I want to see school year and I don't want to see the person status. And it's just going to lay out my sandbox data. Doesn't have a lot of good data there. If I switch this over to the RISE form, again, I can go into my configuration. I can even change the sequence. So if I want to see the cycle, move it up here and maybe remove the date created. So I can change the view of any of the data elements that I'm looking at here. I can also drill in and take a look at that heat map. So I'm going to get rid of that filter for a moment. And this little print icon allows me to produce. Now I can preview this or I can take it out. I'm just going to preview it right now. It's going to show that I showed a screenshot of the heat map, but it's going and grabbing the data elements and putting together that summary view of all of my teachers and color coded with yellow, red, and blue, depending on the criteria that the local education authority has given us. If I run a filter here and say I only want to see the cycle of support is a formal process, now I have fewer records here, 5. And if I run that same report, it's respecting the filter that I just ran. So instead of producing the heat map for the 12 staff in my school, I'm producing it for the 5 staff in my school. So a couple different things you can do with the data elements. The other part over here, so we have saved searches. So notice how I've added a filter and I've done some clicking, and I can also say, show me those that have a performance level of distinguished, and there aren't any. Let me add a couple of different levels here. There. So we can see the performance level here as well. And maybe that's something I want to save. So if I save that search, I can just say, I'm just going to quickly give it a name. And now I don't have to do that click filter again. And it's available here as my save search, but it's also available in the save search card. So if I click on the rise, there's my AIA search. It shows me those staff that have that proficient level and are in the formal process. And I can hyperlink directly in there to see, here's that formal process. And the summary would be where the total scores populating right here from proficient. So this summary tab, this is information that's flowing through from the previous subtabs. And it's showing me that summary view. And then I can go in here and I can acknowledge that I'm signing off on it. So just a couple of different views into how you can access any of the data that's populated in any of the Clevr performance appraisal forms. So I'm going to take a couple more minutes. I'm just going to log out of this environment. And I've set up another quick one just to show you a bit more of a range of a couple of different other forms. So coming in with a slightly different view, I showed the screenshot of this probationary form. So same kind of concept here. I have a couple of cards I'm looking at. These cards and landing pages are completely configurable by the district, and they can be rolled out roll by roll. But if I look at the different forms I have here, I have some student forms. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those, but I'm going to just jump into a few of these staff performance forms to show you different layouts. So here is that one form that it's pretty straightforward, one tab. And down below, we have our collaboration and teamwork with a drop down of the different levels. We have work habits, communication, interpersonal. And up here, we have the skills and abilities specific to, in this case, the bus drivers. That's the data element that I have here. If I switch this to custodian, the custodian skills and abilities change, but all of the other components stay the same. So this was that district that took, maybe I even have it here. Yeah, they had all of these non-teaching forms. And instead of having separate forms for each group, now they have an integrated environment on one form. And this can also be set up so that the end user doesn't have to choose what their position is. If the positions are all available in a source file, like an HR system, then that drop down can be pre-populated. And then the staff would obviously be able to change that. So there's different environments that can set that up as well. And if I go back to one of those components, let me just show another framework here. So here's another example. If I go to this caretaker staff evaluation, they've said, I want one specific for caretakers versus an integrated form. So this one, the evaluation is from a particular time frame. Is it regular or is it employee requested? They've given us these drop downs, completely configurable by district implementation. And then instead of having a separate or an integrated form, they have a separate one for caretaker staff evaluation. And here are the different areas with the rating scale, and the rating scale descriptor is here. So whether you have one evaluation form for each role, and I'll show you another one here, just because it's the same implementation where they have a support staff form. And this is it's the same design, same rating scale, but in this case, they have 4 tabs instead of the caretaker one, which had about 7 tabs. And they just wanted a separate evaluation form for each of their role groups. So it's completely configurable district by district by district. One other form I'll show, and they'll probably wrap up in the next 2 to 3 minutes. I will show, this one is a little more complex. Let's see. Educational system form. And the way that they've set that up, again, the periods, type of evaluation, probationary, or they do every 3 years, or it can be requested by the employee. And here's their design. So roles and responsibilities with a radio button design, leadership and collaboration, descriptors up above. The employee has the ability to comment in this box, and the employer has the ability to comment in this box. So very granular permissions within the same form. And then if I want to print that, it goes and gathers the information from the form and presents it in we have the Clevr logo because that's the Sandbox. This would obviously be the district level logo, a breakdown of some of the different parts in the rating scale, and then the roles and responsibilities here. And that's all that came out actually. So I'm going to bet that that's the only tab that's populated, and it is. So if I don't have content in the form, then it doesn't come out on the printout. So I'm just going to quickly update some of this, generate the printout again, and it will pull those additional areas. So there could be a staff member and that's the focus, just the one area. And then when I pull the other areas, just those components that I've highlighted come out there. Maybe I'll just show the one principal framework that I have here, and then we'll call it a wrap. Maybe I loaded too many forms in here. Let's see. Actually, I'll just search for the principal one. So here we have a framework that was designed for principal growth evaluation. So if it's a vice principal, then the principal is doing the supervising. If it's a principal, then the supervisory officer. And the way they've set up this, they have hyperlink to some local resources. If I click on that, it's not like you can let me in because it's behind their SharePoint environment. And an area for the goal, success criteria, actions and strategies. And then in this one, they're aligning it to the region's leadership framework as an example. Then they have an area for wellness goals and personal wellness goals, which is an optional area. The signatures and the workflow would be here. And I'm ready to submit this to my supervisor. So that notification would be role-based and also aligned to portfolios of responsibility within the district. So I am going to pause there or stop, see if there are any questions. I can answer any of those questions, or we can call it a wrap there. One thing that I didn't mention, but I will mention is Clevr is a collaborative community. So and as my former background as an educator, anything that's developed by any district that's utilizing Clevr is fully available to all other districts. Cruise the gallery of all of the different forms and say, here's a principal growth plan that's like we do, but not 100%. I'd like to start with a copy of that. So we don't have modules. We don't have principal and a teacher and a non-teaching staff module. You have access to unlimited forms. But that collaboration piece is something that districts really appreciate. It creates that professional community across the Clevr community.